Good morning. Bonjour. Buenos días a todos. Welcome to the second full day of the Victoria Forum. We seem to have dwindled somewhat in numbers. I'm sure more people will be filling in some of these empty spaces over the course of the day. But right now, we want to get us started in a good way with a territorial welcome from Elder Terry Barnhart of the Songhees First Nations. Please welcome Elder Terry to the stage.
Good morning. Great to see you all here this morning. Ice Quecho, as the Dutchy or Terry. My late mother was Janet Dick. Skip Dick and Butch Dick are my maternal uncles who I not only love and admire, but have inspired me to start this journey that I am on. To all the other relations that I see, I'd like to say Equantus Kunalahela. On behalf of my family and myself, we'd like to welcome each and every one of you here. Welcome to Victoria. Welcome to UVic. Welcome to the lands of Lekwungen people, lands of smoke herring. We are on the lands of the Lekwungen people. We are a joint nation of Songhees and Esquimalt. We were one before treaties and borders. At this time, I would like to thank Zoe and everyone here at UVic for allowing this time to follow cultural protocols on our lands. I am new at finding my voice, but I know this work needs to be done. Asiyam Nachalacha, Asadachi or Terry, Cheflasan at Lekwungen, Heichka Kwansla Atla, Heichka Kwansla Tejo at Lanukat Lekwungen, Heichka Siyam. Thank you for having me here this morning and enjoy your conference.
Thank you very much, Elder Terry. And let me correct my first mistake of the day, which was that I didn't introduce myself. Stephen Huddard with the forum team, and I'm going to be your moderator this morning. We have quite a bit of ground to cover. It's going to be a big day. Lots of work has been done and is being done in the background, so we'll keep moving things forward. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce Elder Shirley Alphonse, who is going to conduct an opening prayer for us to put us into the right place for taking on the work that we're doing and moving forward together. Just a few words of introduction. Elder Shirley is from the Cowichan First Nation, though she lives in Souk. For a number of years, she was the elder who opened Parliament when Premier John Horgan of Souk was our premier. She is a recipient of an honorary doctorate from Royal Roads University and is also a recipient of the King's Coronation Medal. Would you please join me in welcoming Elder Shirley to the stage?
Good morning, everyone. I just have a couple of things to share before I share my prayer with you. I would like to mention how grateful I am to Dr. Elder Butch Dick for sharing the Zinqua song with you yesterday. The Zinqua opera was composed by Abel Joe and Mr. Morrison, who was a music teacher at our Indian day school called St. Catherine's. So along with Mr. Morrison, Abel Joe composed the Zinqua opera, and that song was from the opera. Also, the Cowichan prayer song, which most of you hear, was composed also by Abel Joe and my grandfather, Alphonse George. I just wanted to share that little bit of information. And also, we are very grateful to Ray Peters, who carried on the songs. and it is still alive today. I also am an elder to Videa organization for youth who are recruited across Canada, Indigenous youth who go to Africa to work and learn and become leaders with the youth in Africa. Also, they have programs for social justice, climate action, and the environment, social inclusion. Lynn Thornton is a director who's been there for 15 years, and I've been the elder for 13 years. And I just wanted to share that because I think they do wonderful and great work, the youth across Canada. Okay. And this morning, I'd like to share the prayer that I had written for our late premier in the legislature for one of the times I was there. I was elder to John. Creator, Great Spirit, we thank you for this day and for each one of you here, from the youngest to the oldest. We thank you for all the blessings of today. Sacred Mother Earth, all that you are, all that you hold for us as living beings upon your earth, around your earth. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for majestic trees, the standing people, the sweet scented flowers, the medicine plants, the shrubs. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the strong protective mountains, the stone people, for the rolling hills of green grass. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the life-giving oceans, so deep, so beautiful, for all pebble beaches, for the clear, sparkling waters of streams, rippling, babbling brooks, the rivers of crystal waterfalls, calming, serene lakes. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the minerals, the metals, the stones. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for the four-legged, the winged ones, for the water dwellers, insects, creatures of the land, the sea, the sky. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for Grandmother Moon, serene and calm, Grandfather Sun, energizing warmth, Brother Stars, Sister Star, sparkling light, Father Sky, clear and blue, Mother Earth, your beauty and bounty. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, for refreshing rains and thunder beams, for cleansing winds of the four directions, for purifying snow, for the four seasons. We say with deepest gratitude, Haichka, Creator, Great Spirit, thank you with deepest gratitude. The footprints Mother Earth holds of our ancestors of the four nations of yellow, black, red, and white, once here, now guiding us with sacred teachings to carry on in a good way of respect, kindness, care, generosity, compassion. For the sake of all children all over the world, that they may live in a world of peace and harmony. Children who will come behind us to the seventh generation. And we say thank you to our beautiful Mother Earth, who is happy to look after us. Sehr.
Thank you so much, Elder Shirley, for those welcoming words, those ways into grounding ourselves in this time, in this moment, in this place, with gratitude, with an understanding that we stand at such an important moment in human history, with generations before us, whose legacy we have, both in terms of the gifts that they have provided us, the work that they did in their lives, we build on today, and also some of the legacy of harm that is ours to continue to resolve through the reconciliation process and in other spheres, as we think about repairing the earth through regenerative economics, which is the area that I'm responsible for at the forum. But before we continue with our next panel, I'd just like to say a few more words about the forum and why this is important, what we're trying to do here. It's a hybrid organization, as you've heard, formed out of a partnership between the university and the Senate of Canada. Could I ask by show of hands, are there any senators present with us yet this morning? Yeah, would you mind standing, please, so that we can acknowledge this relationship? I think that's Senator Osler. Thank you. Thank you so much. And out of this core relationship, we've expanded the sectoral representatives, the representation here at the forum into other areas of the public sector, provincially, municipally, and we need to do more in this regard. We have some private sector leaders here. We had Francis Edwards here from HP Canada on the opening panel yesterday, talking about how important it is to involve this sector in the work that we're doing, and the power of procurement and of supply chain dynamics that spread messages that increase awareness, demand, and advance the job, the huge task we have before us. The other point I'd like to highlight from yesterday's morning session was the lessons learned report. I encourage everybody to look at that report. Out of years, since 1998 till now, the Auditor General's report has been fastidious, looking at how we are doing on advancing specific goals. The lessons learned are 6 overall recommendations to all of us on how to move forward on a different and better trajectory. So I really want to encourage people to go back and take a look at that. Speaking of going back and taking a look, we will be publishing the transcripts of sessions. Within a week, you'll be able to access information online. And although we hope it's pretty good, it's been produced by an AI software, so it may be imperfect. But the point I want to make is that we're now at a time when we have to both move forward fast and slow. You all remember the book, Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow. There's some things now that need to move quickly because we don't have a lot of time. As our good friend Courtney Howard said on the health panel yesterday, led by my mentor, Peter Singer, by the way, he accused me of saying he was my mentee, but in fact, the reverse is at least as true as that. So, but Courtney's point was, if we want to work on mitigation, and we have a narrowing window in which to do so. So thinking fast and slow and acting fast and slow. Slow at the scale of generations and of restoring generational equity and understanding, collaboration. I'd highlight the workshop later today called Rewiring for Reality, led by Gio Andreotti de Machado, which is about a deeper dive into intergenerational understanding in the context of complexity. I would be remiss in not mentioning as well the thanks that we owe to so many people here. I'll very quickly acknowledge my colleagues, our partners, But I want to highlight the families that you have left behind, the people who couldn't be here, but who are at home, tending the fires, making sure that in the case of Vinod Rajasekaran, that his daughter gets to school on her first day of school accompanied. Vinod had to really make a big choice here, and we're grateful for him for coming, making the one that was enabled him to be here with us yesterday and not on his daughter's first day of school. The co-producers, all of the session producers, an enormous amount of volunteer work has gone into that. And of course, the volunteers who are producing this event with us today. Thank you all. I do have to say that in the field of innovation, we are making mistakes all the time and learning from them and moving forward. And I have to quickly cite two mistakes that are enabling us to move forward in a better way. The first was that in planning the plenary sessions for this forum, we had originally intended to hold a youth plenary. After all, that's who is the most important generation. They're inheriting everything that we have done and not done. We need to create more space for youth at the forum. However, having set up that part of the program, we learned that due to a miscommunication, a misunderstanding, another plenary was being developed with a global set of speakers. You're about to meet them, and we had to make room for them in the plenary session. It was politically something very important. We just had to do it. So we regret having had to move the youth session to this afternoon. We encourage you to attend it. It's listed here in your program. And please, Youth on the Front Lines, Shaping Just and Sustainable Futures at 3:15 p.m. And we have youth participation in other parts of the program as well, including later this morning. But that being said, we have a commitment going forward to make more room for youth participation and youth leadership here at the forum. The second mistake that I want to acknowledge and have us learn from is that last night we had planned to have a very special performance by two remarkable musicians. And you have to permit me a moment to just tell you the story of how this came about. David Vest, a blues piano player, is 81 years old, born in Alabama, lives in Victoria, but has played with many of the greats over the years, over the course of his career, and is a 6-time Maple Blues Award National Blues Pianist of the Year. He was there ready to play, but we didn't have a sound system that would enable him to be heard over the crowd that showed up. We've got many more people, although not this morning. There's over 100 more people than we were anticipating who registered in the last day. And so it put pressure on a lot of our systems. Accompanying David is a remarkable young man named Daniel Morel. Daniel's from Montreal, and he's given me permission to share something of his story. He was a child who was being abused at home and was on a lonely walk, thinking dark thoughts, very dark thoughts, and walking across a bridge in the snow, spotted something on the ground in front of him and picked it up, and it was a harmonica. Whether that was an angel that put that harmonica in front of David at that critical moment, don't know, won't speculate, but David has been carrying that harmonica and expanding his repertoire and capacity around that through 10 years of being homeless in Canada. He's been a street musician, a busker, now lives in Victoria and happily, securely housed. But he has a very, very interesting story of how he got here, as I'm sure all of you do. We met, my wife and I met and heard David and Daniel at TEDx Victoria earlier this year. And I just thought we were so struck by their work, their stories, their beautiful music, along with that of Zoe Slusar, the rap artist hip hop artist, I should say, who opened our session at the Songhees Wellness Center. And I had the occasion to speak with a friend from Calgary who's in the arts field, has run arts festivals and theater companies and so on. And I asked him the question that I'll leave with you as well, which is, what does a cultural complement of the Victoria Forum look like? How might we structure programming that elevates our spirits, that connects us through the arts, that challenge us with new framings and a sense of new possibilities and a sense of moving forward together. And I had already told my friend about the encounter at TEDx Victoria with these musicians. And he said, well, why don't you just start there? And I had to say, well, we don't have a budget. We're struggling to get this thing off the ground, and there just isn't a budget for that. And being a thoughtful and generous person, he said, I think you should just go ahead and see if you could get those people on the program. I said, I can make sure that that's taken care of. I don't know if, Colin, are you here? Yes, Colin Jackson. And his partner, Arlene Strong. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here. And we look forward to continuing that conversation. So with that in view, we've managed to reschedule that performance to today. And it was David Vest's suggestion. He said, you know, why don't you just put us on stage at the university? I played there and it just seemed like a natural place to do this. It wasn't an easy thing to do, to find a place in this schedule to do that, given how packed an agenda it is. What we're doing is they're going to perform after the closing session. So there's Joe Clark, Adele Guituni, Rowan Gentleman Sylvester, and by the way, Satsan won't be here, the Indigenous leader of the Canadian Center for First Nations Governance. He is being replaced by the executive director of that organization. I don't have his name to hand, but it's going to be a very interesting reflection on the session overall. And it will be followed immediately afterwards by a performance by David and Daniel. So please, if you can, stay around for that. That'll be at 7 to 7:30. Okay, thank you. So with all of that, I'd like to now introduce an extraordinary panel that I'm very pleased to see coming to the forum. And to get us underway, I'd like to introduce John Richardson, the founder and CEO of Othello Decisions, the regularly voted #1 or #2 best online decision-making, democratic decision-making toolkit in the world. He has come a long way from learning, being inspired back in the days of Occupy Wall Street. But as a lawyer, founder of Pivot Legal Society, he's got an extraordinary story himself, but I won't take up more time here. I'd like to invite John to invite his panel to join us and get us underway. Please join us in welcoming John and the panel. Thank you.
I would like to, introduce my wonderful panelists and also thank the organizers of the forum for inviting us. I think it's an amazing opportunity to bring digital democracy to the front. So we will be joined by video, and in a moment that will be queued up by Audrey Tang, who's Taiwan's first digital minister and an internationally recognized pioneer and leader in digital democracy and civic technology. So we will hear from Audrey in a moment. I'd also like to welcome André Cote. At my far left is a policy strategist at Toronto Metropolitan University's DIAS think tank and a former senior advisor to Ontario's deputy premier with deep expertise in education technology and digital government. Next to André is Liz Berry. Liz is the executive director of MetaGov and a pioneering facilitator of listening at scale, who has collaborated across many group movements around the world to build democratic systems and tools. On my left is Lisa Scherch, who is a professor in the practice of peace building at the University of Notre Dame, with over 30 years in conflict resolution and peace infrastructure design using deliberative technology. And we will also be joined by live video by Jeff Marino, who's the head of the State of California's Office of Data and Innovation, where he leads the team responsible for the groundbreaking Engage California Deliberative Democracy Initiative. So we'll begin with the video welcome by Audrey Tang, Taiwan's first digital minister.
Good local time. I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's Cyber Ambassador, First Digital Minister, and architect of the Taiwan model of digital democracy. It is a tremendous honor and a privilege to participate in the prestigious and impactful Victoria Forum. We are gathering at a time when realizing the UN Sustainable Development Goals is proving more challenging than ever before, and many feel a deep anxiety about the state of democracy. We see polarization intensifying, and the digital tools we use often seem to exacerbate these divides. But amid this sea of adversity is Taiwan, an island of resilience upon which the promise of new possibilities and a sense of calm empowerment rule okay. I will share elements of my vision and approaches that are helping us free the future on the front line of democracy together. We tend to think of democratic infrastructure as a kind of bedrock, stable, solid, but also slow to change. And we often view conflict as a destructive force threatening this stability. But what if we change our perspective? What if we view infrastructure not as bedrock, but as a way to navigate change in an anti-fragile way? And what if we see conflict, those intergenerational or urban-rural divides, not as threat, but as fuel for cooperation? The challenge is that many platforms, what I call antisocial networks, are designed to maximize engagement through enragement. They transform that energy into volcanic moments. So what we need is a way to depower our tectonic plates and empower civic care. In Taiwan, an island formed by 4 million years of plate moving against plate, we focus on building bridging systems. In conducting large-scale civic deliberation, we deploy tools like police where there is no reply button. Attacks on others are impossible. Instead, the algorithm amplifies not the most divisive voices, but a statement that successfully bridge the divide, those earning support from otherwise opposed groups. This turns polarization into plurality or collaborative diversity. It turns a volcanic explosion back into safe, positive, and productive energy. So where does AI fit in the scheme of things? When discussing AI, people often talk about hitting the brakes in fear or pressing the accelerator to the floor. Both views miss the most crucial component, the steering wheel. The landscape is shifting dramatically toward democratic AI. These are open source, decentralized, and crucially, locally aligned models. And this is a game changer. It means any community, a city in British Columbia, a US state like California, or a central government ministry in Taiwan can take these open models and tune them to unique definitions of fairness, accountability, and very affordably. We're building AI not to replace human judgment, but to augment our collective wisdom. The ambition must be to institutionalize this spirit. Democracy can be fast, fair, and fun. We do not have to choose. As the late, great Canadian Leonard Cohen wrote, there is a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. Let us use these tools as well as the power of co-creation, innovation, and openness to let the light in. Thank you for the kind and generous attention. May we have a successful and value-added Victoria Forum. Live long and prosper.
So following Audrey, we'll dial in Jeffrey Marino, who's the head of the Office of Data and Innovation, for the state of California. And each one of the panelists is going to talk a little bit about themselves and their work, and also about what they see as the core challenge or problem facing democracy right now in their kind of experience and motivation. So we'll start with Jeffrey Marino. Can we bring him on camera?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me here today. It's an honor to share our perspective from the state of California and the Office of Data and Innovation. A little bit about my background. Prior to joining the Call to Public Service, I worked in the startup and technology space here in California, working for startups in the real estate technology and job recruitment technology space. There, I specialized in gathering the big data that those platforms were able to amass in order to develop insights that would empower folks in that space, both in the housing market as well as in our job market and the small business community, to make data-driven decisions and to better empower them to be successful. And so I joined state service during the pandemic here in California. And I was asked to volunteer to help with developing some of those data insights as it related to the policy actions that we were taking at that time. I'm sure as many of you all recall, we were implementing policies, not just in California, but across the world in terms of business closures and reopenings based upon case rates, et cetera. We were rich in public health information and data, but quite poor at that time in terms of data that would inform whether or not those policy decisions and how those policy decisions were affecting Californians, including our economy, and really our mental health and well-being. And so I was called to service to work on that initiative. And it was at that time that I was introduced to the Office of Data and Innovation. The Office of Data and Innovation had just been established in 2019, just before the pandemic. It was part of Governor Newsom's first budget. And the Office of Data and Innovation was established in order to partner with other state departments to help improve service delivery through human-centered design, technology, and data. And so we have a very specialized team here at ODI that's unlike really any other department within California state government, with expertise in design, data science, and engineering. And so we also, in terms of fulfilling our mission to improve service delivery for Californians, we hold at the very center the principle that it must be human-centered. We can't help to improve service delivery unless we can create a feedback loop of communication and understanding with those that we serve. And so that has been our main focus since being established in 2019, which is why it makes sense for ODI to take on the initiative of bringing the first digital deliberative democracy platform to the state of California. We kicked off that work just about 1 year ago and did so in partnership with John, and we're using the Othello platform. And we've done so with, we think, some degree of success at this point, though, of course, we are still learning a ton. We set out to use the platform on a completely different use case. But as we were about to launch, the wildfires that ravaged Los Angeles County occurred, and we pivoted. And we were asked by our governor and the administration for an all hands on deck, all of government approach to supporting Angelenos to have a community-led recovery in Los Angeles. And so we pivoted the Engaged California team to focus on enabling that dialogue, that deliberation, and ultimately creating what we're now developing as we speak, a report that will be published on our website, engaged.ca.gov, a report that outlines the findings of that conversation that not only will drive government action, but will also act as a transparency and accountability tool for the people to hold their government accountable. And then I'll close just here on my brief intro by noting some of the challenges, really the core challenge that I see facing democracy in America and democracy in California right now. And it really comes down to one word for me, and that is trust. And trust is really like an electrical circuit. It doesn't work unless it's constantly going both ways, both from government to Californians, and then continuously back and forth. If that circuit is broken, the trust is broken. And the key that we need to follow here is that not only do we need to improve the way that we deliver services to build that trust for our residents and the people that we serve, but we also have to, government needs to trust its people in kind. and needs to demonstrate that we also hold that trust in the people that we serve to make those decisions that will end up driving and empowering and improving their lives. So thank you very much for having me here. I'm very much looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Thank you, Jeffrey. And now we'll kind of hear from each of the panelists on stage, talking about themselves and giving kind of a similar insight into democracy. André, we'll start with you.
Sure, thank you. So hi, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. Thrilled to be here. Thanks so much for having me at the forum and with this this august group on this panel. So I'm André Cote. A bit about my background. I worked in government, in the Ontario government, in the public service, as well as in politics. I was an advisor to a minister of Treasury Board and of higher education and workforce back in the day. And key amongst that, we stood up Ontario's digital service strategy. So I had a lot of empathy for the minister, the BC minister here yesterday, who's taking on that challenge. And it was also during the era of open government. Does anyone remember that back in the day? Feels like, you know, quite a long time ago, I think, from our, you know, our political context today. But so that's a little bit about where I've come from. Today, I am the head of a think tank at Toronto Metropolitan University called the Dais. Yesterday, I introduced this to someone and they said, is it called the Dais? And I said, uh-oh, I better talk to our communications team. We might have a challenge there. But no, so the Dais is the raised platform. And so the symbol there is, it's a place for raising people and for raising ideas. That's kind of our mission. We work in three sort of thematic areas around innovation and tech policy, around education and skills, education and workforce, and around democracy. And ideally, we're doing work at the intersection of those things. And just to get some examples on the democracy front, we work with OCAD University and some other partners in putting on what I think is Canada's biggest democracy summit in kind of in the April timeframe called Democracy Exchange. We have kind of a year-round speaker series called Democracy Forum, which we're kicking off next month. We have Canada's new AI minister coming, so hopefully we'll put some tough questions to him. And we also connected on the digital side. We run Canada's longest-standing survey of online harms on social media platforms that looks at how Canadians are using social media platforms, how they're accessing news and their sort of information ecosystem. And then the harms they're experiencing on those platforms, and ultimately what they believe policymakers should do about this. And so I could maybe come back there. And then finally, we're launching a really neat initiative this year, which maybe I'll leave out there as a teaser because I want to come back to it in our conversation. So thanks, John.
And any thoughts about the challenges facing democracy? Want to weigh in on that? Oh, sorry, did I miss that?
Do you want to jump right to the challenges?
Yeah, just briefly touch on it, and then we'll kind of continue to the next speaker.
Okay, well, I'll try and go quick because I know we have limited time here, so we'll try and go quickly. But I would say, so I'm not the only Canadian amongst the speakers, but maybe I'll try and bring the sort of Canadian perspective because I know you're sort of working out of the U.S. The way I would put it is, I think that we talk a lot about the symptoms of call it democratic decay. So we talk about declining voter turnout. We talk about some of the polarization, the mis and disinformation, the pollution of the information ecosystem driven by social media and other things. We talk a little bit about how it's an increasingly inhospitable place to be an elected official, with just some of the abuse that they take. But my view would be these things are primarily the symptoms, and what we are not confronting is basically the broader neglect, maybe the broader decline of our democratic institutions. And so think more broadly about our electoral systems. This is one area where we do talk a little bit more. But I mean, we basically have systems where, for many of us, our votes, we're encouraged to vote, but our votes mean relatively little given the way that our electoral systems work. and we get governments that are not as representative as they should be of us and our perspectives. We can talk about the functioning of our sort of executive and cabinet-driven sort of governance models between election cycles, which have been increasingly centralized in recent generations, with the result of really concentrating power in the offices of the prime ministers, the premiers, party leaders, all these issues. And so what that does is that takes away power from our elected representatives and from us as the people, from civil society, et cetera. I think another one we're very concerned with is the state of our public administration, our public service. I think a challenge that we've seen is that they have not adapted, they have not modernized. And so, Jeffrey talked about trust. I think citizens are feeling right now that we're not necessarily even trusting our governments to be able to deliver basic services to the way that they should. And so, and I think what's happening south of the border, which I'm sure we will talk about, in a way, it's allowed us to be a little bit complacent, because we've said, while the Trump administration is directly attacking the institutions and also especially the norms and the conventions of democracy, we've been able to pat ourselves on the back and say, well, it's not as bad here, so we don't need to worry about it as much. And so I think the challenge to us is, how do we think much more boldly, much more ambitiously about how we modernize our democratic systems? And we have more ideas there, but I'll pause and turn things over.
Perfect. Awesome. Liz, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah. Is this thing on? Okay. Thanks, Andres. It's wonderful to be here with everyone on the panel and all of you in the audience. Hope to meet some of you over the course of the day. It's lovely to be in British Columbia. The first time I visited British Columbia, I was hitchhiking over an inland land border. Myself, my friend, our bicycles, camping gear. We were in a van full of belly dancers, because that's who picked up us scruffy hitchhikers. And it was around Abbotsford. It was east of Vancouver. I'm from the United States. My name is Liz Barry, and my friend and I at that time were on a listening tour around the United States and also briefly here in British Columbia. We had a sign that said, "Talk to me." I painted it myself. For 3.5 years, we listened to strangers and encouraged them to turn and listen to each other. So nowadays, I use software much more often than signs, but I continue to center the personal encounters that transform hearts and engage minds, and how those encounters build up to shape society. In particular, I use the world's most widely used open source software, the one that Audrey Tang on video mentioned, called Polis, to support social movements, governments of all sizes, journalists, and peace builders, to deepen a group's understanding of themselves as a whole, and to identify how the complexity inside of each individual fits into that whole. My organization is metagov, metagov.org. We advance self-governance in a digital age through research and experimentation and play to generate standards and values for governance technologies, the kind you might use if your online group in Facebook has moderation challenges, or what communities trying to govern online resources like Wikipedia do to set up the rules and deal with conflict. So the lesson I have to share is that abstract concepts like democracy need practical skill building, meaning to be free, we have to do things individually and collectively that exercise and strengthen our participatory muscles. non-participatory politics strips us of the need and opportunity to be informed and shields us from the accountability of the decisions that we would make. This creates fertile ground for disinformation and accusation. So I look to digital technologies, specifically the ones built with democratic values inside, as a gymnasium for our participatory muscles. There's another metaphor. This supports the flourishing of individuals and a community's common good. The problem I identify is that the information age has information sicknesses. And in the information age, democracies fall or are torn down from the inside by their own constituents who lose hope in institutions that can't keep up with increasing complexity and the rate of change. Let me be more specific. Our democratic institutions are having a hard time keeping up with their current tooling. If all we have is an election once every few months or once every few years, it's not a tight enough feedback loop. I'll close with a quote from one of my favorite journalists, Joe Matthews, who says, "As politicking nationalizes, the work of governing, solving those local service delivery problems that Andres mentioned, localizes. The work of governing localizes worldwide." And these are the challenges I look forward to taking on with all of you here. Thank you.
Awesome. Lisa.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Shirk. I'm from the University of Notre Dame, or as you say, Notre Dame, here in Canada, where French is part of your linguistic pattern. I am a dual citizen. So I went to the University of Waterloo, where I studied peace studies, and that's now what I teach at Notre Dame. In the field of peace studies, we believe that people have sort of fundamental human rights, but also basic human needs. And some of those needs are the need to feel heard. And so what Liz did in biking around and sort of listening to people is actually a tremendously profound act of hearing people and helping people feel heard. And, you know, Harvard, many universities now have studied this feeling of being heard. And it is a primary drive of our behavior to feel like other people understand what we're going through. And so I want to introduce a new concept that we've been using a lot of metaphors for democracy up here. I think of democracy as a public service that governments and civil society need to provide to people to help them feel heard. At Notre Dame, I run a lab called the Peace Tech and Polarization Lab. Our first major study just sort of outlined how existing technologies really don't help people feel heard. They're designed like a coliseum with a couple people fighting in the middle and everybody else just observing. You know, and really what we want is a, you know, sort of a space where people can be heard. And indigenous cultures, I've worked for 2 years here in Canada with First Nations, you know, and you have talking circles and you have smudging ceremonies and you have many ways to set the stage for people to feel heard and acknowledged. And what I really loved about the smudging ceremony is, you know, the way that you wash your eyes with the smoke and you wash your ears so that you hear good intents in what other people are saying, and you wash your mouth so that you might speak in a way that can be heard by others. So you have a very profound ritual within First Nations cultures to set the stage for really being able to hear each other and acknowledge each other's humanity. What my lab does now is work with technology companies. So mostly I spend my time with technologists, computer scientists, helping them understand these basic psychological principles of what people need in order to feel heard, because most computer scientists do not study that in college. And so they really need somebody who spent their life, bringing Israelis and Palestinians or working in Afghanistan, like to really sort of think about what in the most difficult, toxic, polarized places, what do we need from each other to design an inclusive process? And so I think I'll leave it at that because we're going to get into a lot more. So I'll pass it to John.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Yeah. I'll just say a few words about myself. I appreciate Stephen's very generous introduction. So I'm a resident here in British Columbia. I was raised in British Columbia. I founded an organization called Pivot Legal Society about 25 years ago and led that for about a decade. Thank you. And as some of you know, Pivot does strategic litigation and advocacy on behalf of marginalized people in Vancouver's downtown east side. But after a decade of that, and some victories, but also many losses, you start to get frustrated with the systems. You realize we can push and we can try and prod, but we don't actually get to make the rules. And the systems that were making the rules are just so problematic. So I left Pivot in about 2000 and just started Othello. And shameless marketing. We got a T-shirt printed, so there it is, Othello. And Othello is basically a digital technology that allows groups to kind of tackle complex problems and find outcomes with broad support. So it's kind of a consensus identification platform. It's different than Polis, which is much more kind of about ideas and kind of people connecting. Well, I think one of the points that I would like you to take away actually is that there is a whole ecosystem of deliberative technologies, and there's actually no one that fits all needs. They kind of fit together in different ways. So Othello has a role in that space, and we work with cities and different levels of government in engaging communities to give feedback on public policy issues. It can be budgets, climate planning processes. And so we've been doing this about 15 years now, and it seems like a need that had catalyzed Othello is starting to become more present in people and everyday consciousness. And so, it's good to be able to meet that need with part of a solution. And the solution is to a problem that I think is quite deep. We're grappling with concerns about democracy now, and recent polling results. It seems a new poll every week is coming out about people's concerns about democracy, and it's right up there with climate change. Threats to our society. But the roots are deep, and I think actually what we're seeing is an antiquated system that just can't keep up with the times. Our legislative system, our parliamentary system was designed in the 1800s, to be honest, hasn't really changed very much since then. Your feedback loop is marking an X in a box every 4 years. I mean, that is if you think about it in technology terms, it's a very low bit rate of information flow. It's hard to keep a dynamic system in tune when you're getting 1 kilobyte of data, every 4 years. I mean, Facebook processes petabytes of data a day. What if our democracy was like that? But because democracy is such a foundation stone to everything, it's untouched. We don't really dare to go in there and upgrade it. But we're not really going to have a choice for much longer. We're either going to have to upgrade it or we're going to lose it. And these are the crisis times that are coming. So I'm hoping that our panel today is going to shed some light on some of the possibilities for a big system shift, an optimistic change towards a better democracy. And we're just beginning. So our first question, we're going to go through 3 questions today. And the first one, I'm going to ask for Jeffrey Marino to come back on camera. And the first question is about polarization. So, can I get Jeffrey on screen? So, we're seeing an increased polarization in politics. Many people have pointed at this as being a critical challenge facing democracy. Please share a bit about your perspective on polarization and what you see as the path forward through that. So can we get Jeff Marino from California on the video camera? Is that possible?
Thanks, John. Yeah, so I mean, many of you there in person and on the panel had touched on such important topics as it relates to polarization and maybe some of the antidotes that we have for that. Upgrading our democracy and our institutions is absolutely critical. And improving and modernizing the way that we deliver services in order to rebuild trust is going to be absolutely critical. Mostly, and I believe Audrey did a wonderful job of noting this in her introductory remarks, which is that we need to rethink our role as government as it relates to democracy as a service, and how we provide the opportunity space for folks to participate in that meaningful civic engagement. And the polarization that we see, especially in America, but really across the world, is primarily mediated through these digital channels that are privatized. And we all understand that in many respects, that polarization leads to profit in many regards. And then, unfortunately, the same voices from our democratic institutions are then mediated through many of those same channels, leading to that same sort of pervasive perspective that we are totally polarized. And I do just want to share briefly our experience in our first engagement in Engaged California, when we were setting up the platform to engage with Los Angelinos on the wildfire recovery. We were warned by many of the stakeholders that we engaged with not to do it. It was too risky. It would lead to toxic back and forth. People were angry, and they already had enough sort of social media channels. As we've launched Engaged California, we've gone through a big sort of change management campaign, both within government, but also with the public, in terms of the difference between this approach and other forms of communication and connection in the digital space. And so we were concerned after hearing from many of our counterparts and stakeholders, and just understanding the climate ourselves from witnessing it every day, that folks were right, and that we were really just going to open up another avenue for toxic a toxic pool. But what we found was that the design, the intentional design, and that design really was demonstrated very beautifully at the opening of the forum today, in terms of ground setting with respect for the community, with an understanding of what we are here today to discuss. And there is one thing that was a surprise to me, and that I've been so pleased with, and again makes so much sense with my team at the Office of Data Innovation, in terms of their expertise in human-centered design, being able to apply those same principles to design out an experience within a digital democracy platform such as Othello, and that's such a core part of this. And when we design it intentionally and deliberately, in terms of setting up that ground setting space, in terms of asking folks to take a civility pledge when they enter the platform, in terms of guiding the conversation into a very productive and targeted space of civic dialogue, it was incredibly productive. We moderated out less than 5% of the comments, of the over 1,500 comments that we collected in phase one. Most of those comments that we moderated out were actually violating the moderation policy, because they were sharing links to commercial services, which is a violation of the policy, not because they were using obscene language, making personal attacks, or really digging into that polarized culture and dialogue. And so it has made me a very big believer in the opportunity that we have if we can both use these technology tools, but then also pair them appropriately with intentional design and human-centered design, that we can and in fact maybe have the responsibility as government to provide a platform where people can be heard, where that feedback loop can be created, and it's designed in such a way to be productive civic dialogue.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Lisa, would you like to go?
That's excellent, Jeffrey. I think that the design of the platforms matters a lot. And if you have one takeaway, just recognize that technology, as many of us have encountered it, is only one way of designing technology. And it really brings out our worst instincts. But we can design for our better angels, the best in us, our ability to hear and listen to other points of view. And what deliberative technologies like Othello, like Polis, what these technologies allow us to do is to really be able to listen at scale. So listen to a vast number of people in a relatively short amount of time. And it does this in a way that we can't actually do when there's, people in the room and there's only one mic that we're all talking into. So being able to listen at scale also is aided by technology that allows us to see there's not just two ends of the polarization spectrum. It's not a binary polarization. There might be 10 poles if you ask people in California how to deal with wildfires, or here in British Columbia, whether two cities want to merge into one municipality. These kinds of questions are usually not binary. There's usually a variety of different answers. And what technology allows us to see is different opinion groupings and help us actually depolarize the toxic binary approach and see that there's actually a lot of different opinions. And so by actually increasing the number of poles, we get to a less toxic way of communicating, and it helps us to see the complexity of the issue. It's not as simple as this or that or us versus them.
Awesome.
Building on that response from Lisa, which I totally agree with, I can add that there's some innovations that democracy is benefiting from that were actually developed in terms of R&D from over in science. Data science that can handle the complexity of, let's say, the space around the issue with many dimensions, different points that are important to different people with different sets of values and different ideas. The data science perspective on that is, they would say that that is a high dimensional issue space. And to really get into it, we want to actually bring in more and more detail called increasing the granularity of the conversation, meaning we actually want to hear in detail from more people, from everybody. And when we're designing technology to handle that, we can pull on some advanced approaches like machine learning to make sure that as we enter that conversation, we're seeing other people's contributions that either show us we're not alone or else bring us into contact with something that is different from the way we normally think, and build up in our responses to those things that are similar to us, things that are different, things that are just surprising at first, can build up into an opinion map. And then we can use these technologies to help us wayfind across it. So in regard to polarization, if we've been given a binary, everything lumped in as conservative or liberal, I would say many of us individuals are adrift in there. Many of us are independents. Okay, but how do we be independent? How do we handle that complexity within each individual? And I would say there's might be some interesting experiments that you could work with on unbundling the large political parties, like unbundle the set of issues that's come to define these major poles, and figure out how a bunch of independents can actually find what they agree on, and you might be surprised. Thanks.
Is that on? Okay. So the question is about polarization. I think, we spoke earlier about the problems, and frankly, I think we understand well the problems. We understand the polarization issue. What I am way more interested in is action, is in solutions, is in experimentation. I think that's key. I think what Liz said earlier about we need to build the muscle for this. We need to try new things. There's a trial and error aspect to it. I love what Jeffrey and John are doing in California. That is amazing. They're trying something at scale, right? And they're iterating as they go. They're seeing how it works. As Jeffrey said, they really weren't sure how it was going to go. So I'll use my time here rather than dwelling on the polarization to talk about something we're trying, an experiment we're doing. So one of the challenges, and someone spoke about this yesterday, was how are employers getting engaged in this? They industry, big organizations, they have a stake in our democracy as well. And one of the challenges with regards to polarization is how do you reach, working age Canadians when they are years, maybe they are decades out of their grade 11 civics class? How do you reach them to help to equip them for a lot of the things that are changing in our digital sphere? So one of the things we are experimenting with, we're launching this year, is a new program called Canadian Democracy at Work. And so the idea is it's adapted from something we saw in Europe and also south of the border. The idea is how do you deliver civic and digital literacy education to working age Canadians? How do you reach them? And so the vector we're looking at is working through their employers, working through big companies, also working through labor unions. And so what we've done over the last 6 months is develop 3 digital and civic literacy modules. So one is on understanding our political systems, and the second one is on understanding mis and disinformation and algorithms. The third on understanding AI and deepfakes that people are encountering. And so what we've done is we're in the trial sort of testing phase. We're experimenting, but so we're testing it with some big companies. So we partnered with TELUS, we partnered with Interac, with a few others. Other types of institutions like the Toronto library system, and there are many other libraries across the country that are very interested, and also with labor unions, including like a big teachers union in Ontario. You can actually pull it up now on your phones if you're interested. The website is at teamdemocracy.ca. So they're basically video-based learning modules. You'll see the face of it is Canadian icon and former CTV News anchor Lisa Laflamme. And it's also offered in our other official language in French. But so we're trying this, and so I put this out there because we're going to be launching it publicly in the next month or so with a call to action. This was supported through some government funding, and so it's free to use. So we would love to get other companies, other organizations on board and experiments. Let's experiment.
Great, thank you, André. And I'll just add a few words on this concept of polarization too. And I think it's interesting to look at our democratic systems and the way we actually do voting as possibly a source of polarization. We live in we seem to equate democracy with majority rule. And well, it's majority rule actually in a way that leads to the polarization. With majority rule, you have winners and losers. You either got your guy in or your lady in, or you didn't, and you're on the outs, right? But this is not necessarily the only concept of democracy. It's actually rooted in kind of a Greco-Roman understanding of how military corps decided their leaders. They just vote winners and losers, right? But there was actually kind of a renaissance in Europe around the 17th, 18th century when Europe made contact with indigenous communities of North America and came to grips with a different concept of democracy. Right? And actually, many First Nations have deeply rooted concepts of democracy where, can you imagine a First Nation putting something to a majority vote and thinking that is going to be healthy for the community? That is not how they do democracy. They will go in a circle, they will listen, they will debate, they will talk for a long time until people come to a shared view. And in that situation, it's not about everyone having an equal right to vote, but perhaps more about everyone having equal right to be heard or to be satisfied with the outcome. This is also an idea of democracy, and I think one that is going to serve us much more powerfully in the future. So we need to think about, are our fundamental understandings of interpretations of democracy going to lead the path to where democracy needs to go in the future? Because I think there's much more to democracy than that. We are going to do a bit of a condensation of our presentation. We had 2 more topics we were going to touch on. We're going to collapse them into a single topic. I'm going to get you to lead us, Lisa. But the first one, and we're going to merge them, is about the role of technology, and try to bring some nuance and color to the idea of DemTech. Maybe you haven't heard that term, but democracy technology, it's actually a big space. And then also tie in the idea of institutional renewal. How can we get to a place where our democratic institutions start to reflect some of these emerging technologies, these emerging opportunities to use information technology? So, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to just be really short and say, in the world today, we already know there's a democracy, backlash. We in the United States are facing some very significant challenges, and we're starting to see that civil society needs to provide democracy as a service to people, and that social movements need to be using digital democracy to help people have a voice in thinking about how we respond to some of the biggest challenges we've ever faced in the United States. I say this because there is no reason why every single morning of the week we can't wake up and look on a democracy platform about the issues that are affecting our community and participate in the decisions that are being discussed online. So, here you might wake up and you might talk about water quality or environmental issues or the highest heat index yesterday in the history of Canada was recorded yesterday in BC, 104 degrees or 40 degrees Celsius. Sort of these issues that are on our minds, we can be waking up, looking at a platform, listening to what our neighbors are saying, and weighing in on how we feel the solutions need to look like, what we believe is, and how the issues are affecting us. And democracy can be this muscle thing that we do every morning, is participating in sharing our experiences and thinking about what action does our community need to take. And if our government's not going to do that for us, then civil society groups can start doing it for us so that we can start exercising this muscle of listening to other people and sharing our experiences and our ideas of what needs to happen.
You're here. John, do you want us to also do our concluding statement, or will that be another round?
Yeah, maybe we'll merge it all together and then we'll do some time for questions, things like that. So yeah.
Okay, great. I have like 4 minutes then. Okay, thanks. So we had a plan, you guys. So one of the things all 4 of us agreed to talk about at the start was that social media's failures show us why we must build trust, transparency, and accountability into the infrastructure of digital democracy. John wrote that phrase out for our panel. And to add to that, I wanted to say, knowing what we now know about social media, what would we have required? Data privacy, data portability, full disclosures on any reuse of data, transparency into the algorithms that govern how we encounter each other online. What about actual governance power over those algorithms and the ability to change them to something that might work better? Another point that John wrote out for us is that each community requires a different configuration of tools and processes. There is no one size fits all. So interoperability between platforms is essential. And I wanted to introduce some of the collaboration that is happening across multiple tool builders at MetaGov and partnering institutions like Lisa's group and many more, to develop a vision for a healthy tech ecosystem where these support systems for democracy, for democratic encounters, are not plagued by corporate capture and big tech dominance the way it happened on social media. That's something we can all work on together. It's like an advocacy platform. So you may hear more from our group later. So those are the things we don't want. What we want to do is maximize local creativity and put in short enough feedback loops that once people actually have their say and make a decision on the way their local government works, they can actually see how it went and learn from it. Okay, so we get better locally at being free. The next theme involves pathways to institutionalization. And so I wanted to mention there's a project going on in Canada that for any of you in government who work on procurement, this is like an interesting, different way to do it. So for some years already, the government of Scotland has already helped its agencies package up any of their wicked challenges into an accelerator program called CivTech. And then teams apply and compete to develop solutions in line with the government's vision. And winning teams get an advantage in getting a government contract to then deliver those solutions. And the government gets exactly what they wanted, terms and everything. So this is a new twist on procurement that I just wanted to say is a possibility in this space. And last year, the Scottish government put out a challenge around public engagement, and that's brought investment into this deliberative technology space, which could help Canada. It's only fair because Canada federally has already helped this ecosystem of deliberative tooling, honestly, for years already, from stages all over the world. I have thanked the government of Canada, specifically a Cultural Heritage Agency, which invested in the Polis platform to build a translation module. That means that people, whether they were writing in French or Arabic or anything, can write in whatever language they want and then see each other's words exactly in the language that they were written in, but with a side-by-side translation into the reader's own language. So thank you, Canada, for that. Towards institutionalization, Taiwan, where Audrey Tang, the cyber ambassador, was speaking from in her video, in 2014, they had a moment, they had a little democracy stumble, and their parliament was occupied by students and hundreds of thousands of people occupied the plaza outside. Okay, but for 8 years before that moment, the Taiwanese government had been running a national training program to teach youth how to facilitate. And so when hundreds of thousands of people got in the street, that population was full of trained facilitators. And that movement was very calm and orderly. I was there myself in person. That's another story. And those youth broke that crowd into small groups and passed the mic around, took notes, brought people with different opinions into supported conversation with each other, and passed the summaries up from all of the small groups into one giant consensus statement that they delivered to their parliament, and then everyone went home. I would like to be part of a movement like that. So then the day after the revolution, the government said, wow, that facilitation training was really got us a lot of bang for the buck. Let's make another training. And so they did. They made a training for their civil servants to run new e-democracy tools to consult the whole nation on more equitable rulemaking. And so for those of you who are circulating in this scene, maybe you've heard of Taiwan before, but you might not have heard that there was a training program for civil servants to help manage the organizational change required to do this listening at scale. So my conclusion for us today is that democratic health and competence requires more people encountering each other in environments that deepen each person's understanding of their own positions, brings them into contact with others' positions, and creates a learning environment equipped with critical information. And so the tools and methods for listening broadly can provide these environments alongside existing democratic institutions. And the repeated use of these tools and methods will strengthen people as democratic citizens and renew the connection between institutions of government and the people that they are of, by, and for. Thank you.
Okay, so I know we are probably tight for time, so I'll try and go quickly, and I'll close on two things. So firstly, I would say that they are really the experts on the DemTech tools. So I will give you more of a practical example of where this can be used. And so this is something that we're doing some deals on the sidelines of the Victoria Forum yesterday with Matt and with John around the use of Othello. So we're running this big program called Screen Break. We do some work in the sort of kids and tech sphere. Screen Break is about the school phone restriction policies that are being rolled out, that have now been rolled out across all 10 Canadian provinces over the last year or so. I think hearts are in the right places in moving forward with these policies. But as we know, education, K-12 education, is a provincial jurisdiction. So you have 10 different policies, all rolled out a little bit sort of ad hoc. And then you have these vast education systems trying to grapple with, well, how do we put these things in place? These ministerial directives that roll all the way down to our schools out in the community. So we're doing a project to support the successful design and implementation of these policies. We've set out across the country to engage people on it. How is this going? So in the last few months, we were able to do roundtables in all the 10 provinces. Great way to meet people face to face. The problem is you can put 15, 20 people in a room. So it's not really a representative sample of, we're able to do national polling. So a national representative, sample of 2,500 Canadians, their attitudes on these issues. That's great, but you're asking pretty high level questions. You're not really able to dig in. So our challenge is, how do we connect with these vast communities of policymakers, school board officials, educators, school principals, and students, critically students, youth on these issues at something resembling scale? And so this is where we see a huge opportunity for Othello, and what we're planning to, I hope, we haven't signed the paperwork yet, but roll out later this year, is the opportunity to engage these communities, potentially through a deliberative process to understand, like, how would these policies work better from their vantage? How could they be better rolled out across our school systems? And how can we create feedback loops to take that input up to the policymakers who are shaping these policies, who are refining these policies? So just a quick example of something, a place where this really fills a critical gap in terms of engaging people in the sort of policy and democratic process. And I would close with this kind of final point about, like, how do we deploy, how do we institutionalize these things? I would say in the broadest sense, there are two paths. One path is you can do so in partnership with governments. So call it the California model, where a government says, I am willing to cede some power, and I am willing to adapt my process, my decision-making process, in order to include these new types of tools, and most importantly, include citizen voice and participation in these processes. That is a very important pathway. I think the challenge these days is we've seen that a lot of governments are not that willing to do that. They're not that willing to cede the power and change the way they do things. The other vector is we, through civil society, do it of our own volition. Kind of like this Screen Break example. These tools enable us to mobilize and engage people at scale. So there is an opportunity for folks outside of formal institutions to engage people around important policy issues. You can assemble a large enough, mobilize a large enough number of people, allow them to prioritize, deliberate, identify the types of policy solutions they would want, and then you bring them to governments, and you seek to influence, and you seek to take back that power through the mobilization of all these people, in the same way that we see, corporate lobbyists and various other interest groups already doing these types of things. So I see these two paths. I think we need to be doing both at once. I think the second path will open the door to more of the first path. And I think in closing, we just need to go. We can't keep dwelling on these problems. We need to go. Digital democracy tools and other ways to reinforce and to experiment in improving and modernizing our democratic institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre. So to the booth, we'll bring on Jeff Marino for our last kind of closing statement from one of the panelists. And then we'll just circle up about that link that I shared earlier. And we'll invite, some questions and some feedback, and I'll set kind of how that will work in a moment. Do we still have Jeffrey? And can we bring him on screen? Perfect. You're on, Jeffrey.
Great, thank you. I'll focus primarily on the institutionalization point, and I'll try to be brief because I think we're out of time. But I will say I think that this is a great opportunity. I know that there are some policymakers there in the audience, and we are right now focused on completely outdated methodologies as it relates to civic engagement. I think we've covered that here on the panels. In 1860, I believe, somewhere around there, Alexis de Tocqueville writing about democracy in America, paraphrasing something around the fact that town halls are to democracy what primary schools are to science. It puts them into the people's reach and helps us to play with it and understand it. We are still doing town halls the same way we were doing them in 1860. And our population in the United States has 10x'd since then. When that was written, the telephone wasn't invented. So we really need to up our game as it relates to connective technology and civic engagement. And those tools are within our reach. We need the political will to be able to do that. André really keyed in on the willingness to see that power. And I think it's a good opportunity in terms of what Audrey was saying at the beginning and changing some of our perspective as it relates to representative democracy and the role of our legislature being closest to constituents and sort of being the voice that translates their needs into policy. And then that policy goes to the executive branch to be quote unquote executed in that regard. I think there's a great opportunity for the legislative branch to look to and put pressure on the executive branch to put these tools into practice within the administration and carve out a permanent space that is cross-cutting across the different silos of government that fosters a staff that has these skill sets, that opens up the space to bring on these tools and technologies, and then sets them on a mission of scaling it across the government so there can be that continuous dialogue that is fostered throughout the implementation and delivery of the services that are demanded by the people.
Great close, Jeffrey. Thank you very much. So I know that we're very short on time. I mean, you can remain here at your forbearance. We'll stick around for a bit. I just want to share, the results of that link that I posted earlier. Oh my goodness. And what we have, I think it looks like almost everyone in the hall voted. So congratulations, everyone. We have about 80 people voted. Lowering the voting age came out at 82% consensus. Proceeding with passive deliberative democracy, 80%. Some form of proportional representation at 76%. And then more referenda at 35%. And so, in the course, with part of your attention, over the course of the last, hour, we undertook a multi-criteria decision-making process. Now, whether those are the right criteria or not, up for debate, but, some form of moderately sophisticated analysis, examining these different things. Imagine what would be possible if we actually went at it with some force, in the size of group over, distributed over a couple of days, et cetera. You can get pretty smart insights coming out of almost any group of people. And, if you have a representative group, a large representative group, you get mandates of action, and very powerful ones. So with that, I think we have a couple of mics. I'm not going to actually invite questions. I'm also going to invite you to provide feedback to us. Where do you see the opportunities? What do you think of these tools? And, we invite your feedback along with a question. So And I see Stephen coming up. He's going to let us know how much time we actually have here. How much time do we have, Stephen? How many questions should we try to have here?
Probably just one or two, John. I think
Perfect.
we're
Great.
under
So
some time pressures here. Thank you.
please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I'm not sure that I have any real questions to tender, but perhaps some comments on democracy and technology, starting with the latest news. From Vancouver City Council and the Parks Board, they've really done the U-turn on climate change and technology, using Signal Messenger and disappearing messages to step outside of the ethical requirement for public meetings and decide to turf, or rather astroturf, a field for competitive soccer, and to dump some of the city's climate change initiatives. So let's all give a hand for the political party ABC. And here in Saanich, we had a local government's move called the alternate approval process, where citizens got up and went out and signed a petition, which each signature had to be on 6 typewritten pages to overturn a massive spending bill. So that's the preface. My name is William Gibbons, and my studio name is Influency,
Great.
which in light of today, everyone's giving words like that a bad name, but I coined it many years ago.
Perfect. Thank you.
And
We'll have
so
one more question.
I'd like to make a comment. I am a Canadian who did a democratic experiment with technology in 1997. That was one of the first public internet kiosks and first online internet petitions to the Parks Board.
Before we go on, I would just like to have a bit more time. We have very limited time, so I might move to one more question. Is that okay?
Sure, I'll answer questions from the audience if you like.
Well, you know what? We'll have one more question, and then we'll all be available, circulate around, and people can come up and ask questions if they like. Would you like to go?
Thank you. Yes, it's Claire Atwell with Regenerate Cascadia. Bi-regional regeneration is my area. And I just want to say it's a joy to hear what you're talking about. This is the conversation we need. The thing that I see is that we have, as you were pointing to, centralized decision making, and the capacity for communities to do collective sense making has really been eroded. And so while the technology is critical for holding those larger conversations, the sense making on the ground and the conditions for doing that and the trust building and relationship building is very denuded. And just wondering if there's anything you can point to that you know of where the intersection of Demtech, I've not heard that term before, is coming together with those kind of processes. So.
Anyone like to speak? This, I think this is on your bound.
Hi, it's great to meet you. I've heard about your organization before, and I am in conversation with the bioregional movement generally about the beautiful mission that you have. Probably a few of us might be able to comment on this, but you know, how do these online technologies come into our local in-person communities? And I would say with careful design, I personally have interwoven this listening at scale into sociocratic processes. I don't want to get into jargon here, but just since it sounds like you're very involved in, you know, small group process, I would say, yeah, it's a process design question. Loosely, design thinking has brought us a frame of the double diamond, where to approach a problem, first you want to go big and diverge and bring in lots of perspectives and ideas, kind of like how Lisa was talking about. Like we need to source a diverse set of opinions and let them stand on their own merits. And then there's a convergence process, a process to bring coherence then out of all of that volume of participation. And the simplest process design that I recommend, and I've developed this with Audrey Tang, the cyber minister, is ridiculously called the diamond sandwich. So the diamond is from the double diamonds. The sandwich is from, say you need to do a group process. And if anyone's ever done a group process in the times before this technology existed, you've done it in person. So that's your starting point. So you're in person. And then you can bring in digital technology to either go into that high dimensional and fine grained detail that we were speaking about before, or engage even larger numbers of people. But even if it's the same number of people you started with, you can still go into a technological space to help you process the complexity. So that's the digital mystery meat in the sandwich. And then you put the other bread on, you get back together in person and talk about what you've just learned about the issue space. So that's how you have the diamond of information processing on top of the sandwich. Yeah, if diamond sandwich, the AI generated images of diamond sandwiches are really ridiculous. Okay, I'm gonna stop here, but just say process design is a very interesting and rich field for any one of you who are organizers or facilitators. You might get very interested in some of this technology. Thank you.
All right, I've been given a signal from Stephen that we're done. But we'll be all around here today, and happy to, we'll stick around. We'll turn off the mics. We'll hang out here a little bit, but we're all very appreciative of your attention and that you are interested in these issues, and we'd love to chat more with all of you. So thanks very much.
Thank you so much, John and panelists. It's been wonderful to have you here, and I think this is a theme, such an important underlying and overarching issue for us at this time, and really appreciate your leadership. So we're going to explore the democratic question a little further from another angle this afternoon after lunch, a session called Defending Canada's Democracy, which will include perspectives from the recent Saanich Victoria referendum process with the Civic Assembly. So those of you who are interested in democracy, and I hope that's many of you, encourage you to attend that session as well. So please join me again in thanking this wonderful panel. And I'll just quickly mention that something that's going on at the forum is that there are a lot of side meetings going on. It's not just that people forgot to show up today. They're actually in other parts of this building and elsewhere conducting intense conversations that, oh, since you're here, let's make sure that we meet and spend some time together. This happened yesterday with this group. We had Jeffrey Marino coming in from California in a meeting with the Minister of Citizen Services, Diana Gibson, talking about potential collaboration, and very much looking forward to that conversation continuing. So thank you again, and we'll let you leave the stage whenever you like. A couple of other things to mention. We are running on a very tight schedule here. So when I let you go in a moment, I would encourage you to refresh, come back soon, rather than the full 20 minutes. If we could cut that to 10, 15, that would be enormously helpful to us and would ensure that the following sessions have the time that we want them to take. I am going to just take a moment though and share a message that Saul and I received this morning from one of our Japanese participants. I can get my phone to behave. Here is what Hideyuki Inui sent to Saul and I, commenting on the forum, and just have a listen to this. I want to share how I am enjoying the forum and appreciate it. Let me briefly tell you how quickly. This became a really great opportunity for me and my Japanese colleagues to learn and catch up on what is going on in Canada and internationally in deeper contexts and concrete visible and invisible systems, really visually. Especially, I loved parallel sessions in the afternoon yesterday. Also, and this is the key point, because this is about the technology complement to this kind of deliberation, the wordly translation is amazingly working for me and other Japanese participants. This is not just a translation, it's better than verbal interpretation. This is like a movie with subtitles where you can feel the original conversation. Moreover, we can observe what's going on and be more aware of both cultural contexts in English and our native language. Kenta, Tomoyuka, and I actually open up the window of translation on an iPhone and AI on a PC screen, and we can immediately ask background questions about something we did not know about Canadian social systems, First Peoples background, for example, which creates wider and deeper views during sessions. This is so innovative in an international conference and enables us to have a deeper understanding and communication with other participants. So that's also happening here. We're innovating as we go, learning. And so please, thank you so much. See you soon. It's 10:20. Please be back by 10:30 if you can. Thank you.